Hello everyone, here's another video on the channel. For those who aren't subscribed yet, please subscribe and leave a like. If you enjoy the content, share it and feel free to use the comment section, as always. Today we're going to talk about part 2 of a video where I discuss the few relationships that actually work. That video got a lot of views. And in it, I explain those modern relationships. Modern here meaning more about age, really, like young people around 25 or 30 years old. People from Generation Y who are dating nowadays. In other words, I even mentioned that most of these relationships started about 7 or 8 years ago, back when Instagram hadn't completely poisoned everyone's minds yet, especially women who tend to be more susceptible to Instagram. When it comes to dopamine, just like men are more susceptible when it comes to pornography, and I talked about how these couples manage to keep a certain harmony between them. Today, I want to add something to that video because I think there were a few things missing. Also, several months have gone by, and I ended up having some new insights, some different ideas that I think I can share here with the community. To start with, this issue of people always talk about it. Some get confused, especially those who have just come across more masculine content in the manosphere. Recently, they end up mixing up red pill with MGTOW, with all sorts of concepts, some rules, dogmas. There's a huge amount of confusion about all this. Epiphania and I really hammered on this point in the last live stream we did with the EPI subscribers. And a lot of people get kind of freaked out. We really laid it all out there, saying some truths that some guys didn't like. It's not that they didn't like hearing it, but they just didn't know, and it made them uncomfortable because a lot of them were mistaken. Obviously, there are also the more old school folks like me, EPI, and even Drive. Alpha, who was also on the live stream, he's an old school real guy who was around during that golden era, even before Hakun and Kodama, right? Back in the days of the Buffalo Forum, the real forum. Few people know this, but the red pill movement never started out as the idea of men going their own way. That only came later with the men's rights issue around 2010. Then, moving forward, with the Misandric Bubble article, which was still in 2014, that's when people started talking about it here in Brazil. About this idea of men going their own way, but back then, the red pill was still mostly about recognizing women's behaviors so you wouldn't get screwed over. In fact, that whole topic was never really discussed, for example, until the movement started, where men decided not to get married, not to have kids, not to live together, and so on. So when Nessa Melita came onto the scene, for example, he was married, and even Rolo Tomasi. And if you went into a real forum, which was really high level back then, in the early 2010s, late 2000s, during that transition from Orkut to Facebook, and started talking about getting laid, ghosting, rotation, or the carousel, everyone would make fun of you. So there were people there who genuinely wanted to know. They had never realized it before, but after waking up to the profane side of femininity, they saw that women didn't really like it much. In reality, they hardly like romance at all, or clingy guys, or guys who are always available. They care way more about looks than they admit, and the whole status and money thing also matters a lot. So after some guys figured this out, they said, I don't want a serious relationship anymore. I don't want to think about getting married. But some of them use this to their own advantage. So, for example, when people go and hassle Junior from the Subbundo Intellectual channel saying, oh, a married red pill guy, actually calling someone a married red pill is like saying, just like I said on EPAW's livestream, it's like calling a boxer a wimp. Those things just don't go together, right? A goalie can be a wimp, but not a boxer. So it has nothing to do with it. One thing is the acronym, one thing is men going their own way, and another thing is the red pill. This isn't just Trunks from the Future's opinion. This is a fact, okay? This is a chronological fact. So, when this issue of women's behavior comes up, it's much more about not getting screwed over in relationships, whether casual or long term, than about a philosophy focused on escaping the state's constraints against men, which is a whole different conversation. So, these are things that can complement each other, but they're not synonyms, and they're not Siamese twins. I was going to say embryonic. They're not conjoined twins. So be very careful with these definitions. If you don't like a certain creator's content, if you're against selling courses, against asking for super chats, sponsorships, that's fine. That's one thing, but don't mix up the concepts. So when the acronym comes up, what does it recommend to men? There are three dogmas. The first is not to get married, because marriage, both from a legal standpoint and an emotional one, is very harmful to men. So, even though there are harmonious marriages, they end up being a minority. When it comes to divorce, the division of assets is very complicated. Most of the time, the man doesn't get to keep his own property. So, unless you have a Fluminense lawyer on your side, right? If you don't get it, if you're not into soccer, you won't catch that reference. Sorry about that. But in the end, men end up getting screwed over way more than women in the courts when it comes to assets. In family court, especially when it comes to not having kids, which is the second mantra, it's even worse. When it comes to parental alienation, it's rare for a man to get custody of his children. And then there's the issue of living together, which can also be considered a common law marriage and lead to a possible division of assets. That's where all the emotional stress comes in too. So those would be my recommendations. Never, okay? I can say this both from foreign content and from what made its way here to Brazil in the old real forums. And even here on YouTube, there was never really talk about not dating. But why did dating end up becoming a problem when it used to be something much more casual, for example, or more trivial, or easier than marriage? Because Brazilian men don't know how to date anymore. They're completely emotional. I've never seen a generation so obsessed with wanting to move in together, wanting to see each other every day, that whole thing where you seeing your girlfriend, seeing the girl once or twice a week, going to the movies, grabbing a pizza, doing something together on the weekend, and then each going back to your own place. That's how it was in the 1990s. That's what worked. That's over now. It's like today, nowadays, if a friend invites you out for drinks, right? I've already told you guys that I don't drink. I don't like alcohol, never have, ever since I was a kid, going to parties and all that. I was always the one who drank the least, only drank a few times in my life. It never really appealed to me, but I still caught a bit of that era with the guys. Just a little. Okay, but I still caught a time when the guys would go out to drink and just hang out, drink casually. You didn't have to drink until you got sick and threw up, or anything like that. So, like the guys, nowadays, they've lost it. They get all worked up over everything. Now, if they go out to drink, they go all out, and if they get into a relationship, the guy stops seeing his friends, turns into his girlfriend's doormat, keeps posting little stories online. These days, you see way more guys posting pictures on social media than women. Back in the Orchid days, that was unthinkable. Now guys are posting way more, and the guy is always grinning while the woman has that blank look on her face. Because it's rare for a woman to date the guy she really wants. Men have opportunities, women have options. So that's a really key phrase in our circle that you should remember. A man takes advantage of the opportunity he gets. A woman has options, she chooses. And often, none of the options she has are worth anything, but she still chooses. None of them are worth anything, but she still chooses. A woman goes with the least bad option, right? And a man goes for the woman who's open to him. Just so you can see how unbalanced the dating market is. And it turns out that guys have forgotten how to date. So, today, when I look at it, even though at first, when this movement of men going their own way started, then came as a complement in a parallel but also complementary way, not 100% separate from the red pill movement, guys didn't really stress about this whole dating thing because dating is just dating. Dating was something that didn't really bring a lot of risk to the guy, like business or living together. It was assumed, too, that the guy would use protection, that he'd take precautions about that, or something like that, but no. Here in Brazil, guys feel the need to move in together. They feel the need to introduce you to their family after just 3 or 4 weeks, to post pictures. It's also emotional. Guys here are totally driven by their feelings. So dating has ended up becoming something really. These days, I see that most guys are. Blue Pew just doesn't have the emotional capacity to date. So, here in the community, here where I know there's a good level of awareness, the level here on my channel and on partner channels is really high. I know that a lot of people here could get into a relationship just fine. But then, a lot of guys just don't feel like it either, right? Those guys who have the opportunity, who have some options, and could be in a relationship, I'm not talking about incels or sub-5s who don't want to improve or who can't be helped, though some of them can be helped. It's a harsh black pea reality. I'm just saying, but it's true. But really, most people can be helped to become someone. Alright, but sometimes the guy is so deep into this defeatist mindset that he doesn't want to go to the gym, follow a diet, nothing. But that's how it is. Sometimes the guy actually has the option to date someone, but it's kind of a drag. So it's more for those who get into a relationship and manage to function in it. The first thing to understand, Maybe this relationship you're in really ties into what Davey from Uma Braco da Vida talks about, and he's mentioned it in some of his videos, which I find really interesting. Davey says that throughout his life, he met a lot of couples, both in Minas Gerais, Bahia, and all over Brazil, who were much more like friends than husband and wife. So maybe a healthy relationship, a healthy dating life for you, could be a relationship, even a future marriage, where you're not gonna have that much sex. You're not gonna have that many sexual acts, and maybe if you're the kind of guy who works out, eats well, and gets enough rest, your testosterone is naturally already gonna be high. So, how are you going to be in a relationship where that's not going to be such an important factor? So, for men, this is where what the legendary Silvio Carich, one of the biggest names in the manosphere back in 2009, 2010, used to say comes in. There's no way you can have a relationship where you don't have a high sexual frequency. So, maybe a functional relationship will have that. Another point about a functional relationship, some women, they see this modern thing with social media as nonsense, both in what they say and in practice. A lot of them will say it's all superficial, but they can't live without it. But some really do see all that as complete nonsense, which is what some guys even say, that it would be like those so called exception women and so on. The problem with the exception woman is what a lot of content creators have already talked about. Even Newt always brings this up, which is that, okay, fine, she might even fit into that exception category for a relationship, but who says she's gonna want it? You, the average Brazilian guy? So, a lot of these girls, even the ones who keep to themselves and aren't wild like the others, most of the ones you see on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, they end up setting the bar really high. They look for groups of men who are just as high status, or even more so, than those girls in bikinis on yachts on Instagram. So it's something that's really complicated when we talk about functional relationships because even though they exist, for you to start one today, when there's already all this baggage, all this emotional and dopamine driven load from Instagram and smartphone culture, which has completely changed social relationships, how does the guy even start dating nowadays? So he needs to understand that maybe he can start as long as he doesn't try to play house or introduce her to his family right away. Also, don't keep posting everything online. If you're not constantly posting photos and you both sleep at your own places and just see each other once or twice a week, you can absolutely have a healthy monogamous relationship. But in the long run, that's no guarantee of anything. It could be that the spark fades. It could be that you're just not that kind of person. I could never get into a relationship, even though I recognize that friendship is one of the pillars of relationships that work. It has to be a solid pillar, but never the main one. Never the main one, in this case. And not because the main thing should be lust or physical attraction or how often you have sex. Even though we're not animals, we don't need to be doing that all the time. All of that is extremely important. Denying that is just a brutal coping mechanism. So, like, if the guy sometimes has lower testosterone, that's not what I'm talking about here. I don't mean to put anyone down. Some guys just aren't that attached to this stuff. And sometimes they have a really strong inclination toward fatherhood, or living together, or building a family. He might think about that in the future after getting through this stage. It's about being together, like being in a relationship for 12 years without living together. The problem is, that's not what I meant when I said what I'm saying here. It's just completely unrealistic that some guys are already living together after 6 months. So you keep filtering, and the number of guys today who could have a healthy relationship gets smaller and smaller. Without losing. Without losing too much. Without wasting energy, time, and money. And the idea that they want to date is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So I get it, because now I understand that people really mix this up a lot. Like, oh, is it red pill in dating? Is it red pill in marriage? I don't know what. Because the environment has gotten so unbearable that it's easy to confuse things. But even so, they're different things. You can combine the two, right? You can combine the two. I've even told you guys before, I have absolutely no desire to get married or have kids. If that ever happened one day, it would be because the Earth's poles reversed or something like that. Something way, way, way off the radar, you know? Like a nuclear war or something. Something totally out there. Because I just don't see the appeal in monogamy. I think monogamy is a system, even though I recognize its benefits for society in general, for me, for my specific nature, it just doesn't fit. I find it extremely boring. I don't see the point, especially when you have options to explore. Man, I just don't see any sense in monogamy for me. But I know there are a lot of guys who like it. Most guys do. If they didn't, there wouldn't be so many guys. Taking on single moms, getting into relationships, dating, being romantic, falling in love, right? Most men really do have this monogamous view of the world. So, as we get to the final stretch of the video, pay close attention to this. So, here's this issue of dating. You're not breaking any rule, first of all. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not to any content creator, not to any community. Live your life. I know there are content creators, some you like more, some less, but avoid ad hominem attacks, okay? Avoid the drama. Don't stop reading someone's work just because he's married. Like Rollo Tomasi, don't dismiss what he says just because he's married, you know? There's some people who just don't get it. It's like a network. The Pew network is understandable at first, but when it becomes a lasting thing, this Pew network just keeps attacking. And when it comes from men, that's just stupidity. That's even worse than feminist blue pill. So you really have to be careful with that, guys, you know? Be careful with that. Filter out what really matters to you. Understand the history of the movement behind all this. The movement actually started as a way to expose the true and profane nature of the feminine. This goes back to the original PUA, to David X back in '84, even to Neil Strauss, to the game, and so on. There are good things in that scene. Also, filter out things about human behavior, about nonverbal cues. Furry is a guy, shout out to Furry, he's an expert in this. He's one of the best, one of the smartest guys in the history of our community. For real. And you'll know how to filter things really well, right? From everything, all kinds of content. You filter it, you'll find good stuff. Obviously, you'll be able to. I'm not saying you won't, but you'll find way more good stuff than from any of those Pee-wee type creators out there just selling courses on YouTube. It's mobile, right? I'm not. No, I'm not. Remember, in proper proportion, I'm not putting everyone in the same category. There are better creators and worse creators, but the moment you just dig your heels in like a mule and say, no, not this guy because just because he's the old guy, you know? A lot of people criticized him when he started selling courses. That's what the old guy doesn't have. The content there is like that. It's basic, it's fundamental, it's foundational, it's unique, right? It's of tremendous excellence. And you're going to stop listening just because the guy's dismissed? Don't buy the guy's course, ignore his ads, and just consume what actually works for you. So I see a lot of people getting all worked up over one action, one attitude, and ignoring all that gratitude. EP has already made a video about how Brazilians are. They're ungrateful because sometimes the guy says something you don't like. So, you know, learn to filter things. And if you're gonna start dating, my recommendation is that each person sleeps at their own place. Here, I'm actually giving some real advice, okay? Now, this is one of those rare moments where I'm giving my 2 cents about someone else's life. And if it works for you, you apply it to your own situation and toss out what doesn't fit. Each person sleeps at their own place, don't see each other more than twice a week, no introducing to the family too soon, and no photos on social media. On that, I totally agree with Brumau. Social arts, that's a woman's thing. If anyone's gonna post a photo, it should be her, not you. So don't get carried away. Even if she's a really beautiful girl, a Stacy, don't get carried away. Otherwise, you're gonna get played. Learn how to date if that's what you want. If you want a little monogamy at this point in your life. Now, when it comes to marriage, having kids, and living together, you need to know there's a risk, my friend. You need to know there's a risk, and the one who has to weigh the risk and reward in your own life is you, not me. And that's that. The acronym, the movement that comes up later that discovers the nature of women, can talk about it. And they say you can really get screwed in a divorce, that you'll probably get screwed even more in a custody battle over kids, because that really favors women, way more than just splitting up assets. Like I said, if you have a really, really good lawyer from Fluminense, you might be protected. And the issue of living together can also be a real headache. Not just because of the legal stuff with assets, but also the stress of living with someone who, a lot of times, this girl you decided to move in with, she might have been a great girlfriend for you. If each of you lived in your own place. Because it comes back to what Davey always says. When you get into a relationship, both sides end up taking on problems from the other person that wouldn't even exist if you weren't living together. Actually, those problems will still exist even if you don't live together, but you can work around them because there's the whole thing about waiting, not seeing each other every day, each person sleeping in their own place. You don't bring all that into your home. Now, when you live together, you can end up ruining a relationship that would have been healthy, that would have worked out, just like the topic of this video, even those rare exceptions. But sometimes you end up screwing yourself over because you decided to play house, you know? A big hug to all of you, my friends.